You might love animals, and here comes another episode in English because the author of the book is just amazing. Ed Wong won the Pulitzer Prize regarding COVID, and he has one of the most listened to TED Talk, and his book, A 9-Month Word, which translates in French, and that's why I received him, Un Monde Immense, got more than 3,000 reviews that point him at 4.7. It's just an amazing book, and we're going to learn about the senses of the animals, how the animals are sensing the world, understanding how our understanding of life, of the world, is so narrow compared to what the animals can actually feel and how they can understand the world. It's just so fascinating to just listen to him. I'll let you do that. Allez, Blanc, c'est parti. So, hi everyone. Hi, Ed. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for having me on your show.
I'm very glad to have you, actually. Your book is just so fascinating. When it comes to the reality of our world, thinking about the fact that our reality is not the reality, it's just, I think for me, it was mind-blowing somehow. And maybe the first question I have, and it's probably a bit complicated one for a first one, but for you, what is reality?
So, I am a science writer, right? Like
Right.
I write about objective things in the world that are true. The fact that there are other animals around, the fact that they are alive, the speed of light. All of these things are true whether we choose to believe them or not. But I think that there are many sides to the world around us that are heavily influenced by our culture, our values, our ethics, and in this case, our biology. The core idea of my book is that different creatures have very different understandings of the world around them because they perceive that world in radically different ways. So I could be sitting here in this room with my dog or a snake or a bat or an elephant, and we would all be sharing the same physical reality, but we would be having totally different experiences about it. Because, for example, my dog would prioritize the sense of smell. The elephant would be hearing low frequencies that I can't hear. The snake might smell chemicals in the air that I can't smell. The bat would be using a kind of biological sonar, producing high-pitched calls and listening out for the echoes that I wouldn't be able to hear. So we would all, be sharing the same objective space, but we would be each trapped in our own unique sensory bubble. And that is the core of the book, that each of us is only privy to this thin sliver of the fullness of the world.
Would you say that, what are the issues that you would say are with our perception of reality? What is the issue with our perception of reality? Sorry.
So the issue is that it is limited, and that is the case for every animal in the world, right? So my eyes and ears and nose and hands give me access to a particular cocktail of sights and smells and sounds and textures. That's going to be very different if you are a dog, or if you are a seal, or if you are a bird. And the crucial thing here is that I don't perceive those limitations. I'm not sitting here thinking that there are giant holes in my perception. I'm not feeling the sense of my perception of the world being incomplete. That is, however, a very powerful illusion, and it's one that all animals share, because all of our experiences of the world are always incomplete. There's a wonderful word for this concept. The word is Umwelt. It is German for environment. But in this context, it doesn't mean the physical environment. So my Umwelt is not the bed that I'm sitting on. It's not the walls around me. It's not the phone that I'm holding in my hand. my Umwelt is the sensory world that I can perceive. It's those sights and sounds and smells and all the rest that my body allows me to perceive, but that is only going to be a small slice of what there is to perceive.
Mm-hmm. I know the word Umwelt is very important to you, indeed. Maybe we should try. Maybe we should try beginning with the animals that are the closest to us. Probably the dog. I know that you now have a dog. It's you have it since 2 years, right? If I'm correct.
Yes, that's right. 3 years.
3 years.
His name is So he's a corgi. His name is Typo. He's very, very sweet, and I got him in the middle of writing this book.
Nice.
And I'm glad for that, because I had already talked to scientists who study how dogs sense the world. I had already written a bit about dogs, and that completely changed the way I interacted with my dog when we got him. So dogs exist in a world dominated by smell. Their nose is their most important sense organ. And you can see that in lots of different ways. So just the anatomy of the nose, for example. A dog's nose has side slits in its nostrils. So the nostrils curve round to the side. Next time you look at a dog's nose, you'll see these slits. Those are really important. Like if you imagine a dog sniffing along a surface, like say the ground, you might imagine that every time it breathes out, it would blow away all of the scented molecules that lie on that surface and actually make it harder for it to sense the world through smell. But actually, those side slits on the nostrils create these swirling currents of air that sweep those molecules into the nose. So even when the dog is breathing out, it is actually getting this influx of air into its snout. And so its sense of smell is continuous. It's not flickering in and out like ours would be. It just has this steady stream of smell going into its nose. And once the air gets into its nose, it goes into a part, like it splits in two. So one part goes into the lungs and is for breathing, but another part goes to the back of the nose, and that is specifically for smell. So dogs have all of this like internal hardware that give them this very deep and continuous sense of smell. And then they put that sense of smell to good use. If you walk with a dog, you'll see that it is constantly sniffing its surroundings. Like it's just always exploring with its nose. It will sniff new plants that it encounters very delicately along every leaf and every stem. It will pause on patches of pavement that look completely nondescript to us, but that are clearly bursting with smell information to them. When dogs meet each other for the first time, what do? They sniff each other. So smell is really, really, really important to them. And I think that we sometimes forget that. People will train dogs are famously trainable, right? The dogs can sniff out drugs and electronics and endangered species. But smell is such an important daily part of their lives that they need a chance to use their noses. And dogs that get a chance to use their noses tend to be happier, more optimistic, less anxious. But like when you watch people walking their dogs, what do you see? Like often people will yank their dogs along on the leash if they stop to sniff. People treat walks as if they were exercise, or as if they were just travel from point A to point B. But if you do that and you stop dogs from enjoying the world through their nose, then you're actually doing them a bit of a disservice. Like I think of it as, imagine going for a beautiful hike with a friend, and every time you spotted a beautiful view or you stopped to look at, a bit of forest, your friend covered your eyes and just pulls you along on the path. It would be a really a horrible experience, right? And I think that is, I think that's kind of what we end up doing to dogs that we really care about and want to have a good life, because we do not think about their Umwelt, because we forget that their sensory experience of the world is totally different to ours and must be catered for in a different way.
Also, what we don't like about dogs usually, I mean, I don't have one dog, but I have friends who have dogs, and I've been seeing that all my life, when they smell genitals, and we hate that when they do that to people, even to dogs sometimes, but mostly to people. And is there an explanation why they do that?
Yeah, I mean, because genitals are bursting with smell information, right? Like our pee contains a huge amount of information about us. It's sort of a biography written in smelly molecules. A dog smelling a person, or certainly another dog, will be able to tell things like identity. A dog sniffing a patch of pee on the sidewalk knows which other dog left that pee. You will be able to probably tell things like age or health, maybe diet. A lot of information is locked in that world, and we just think, oh, it's gross, but to a dog, it's not gross. To a dog, it's actually incredibly informative. Like I think of it as like, when I walk my dog, every time he walks past a bit that another dog has clearly peed on, he smells it. And to me, that's basically identical to me checking my social media feed. Right? It's a way of catching up with individuals that he knows who aren't right next to him, and he gets information about their lives. It's exactly the same as when I look at Instagram or Blue Sky or whatever. Like it's and I think it's really wrong actually for people to find that gross. Like that's us mapping our values and our senses onto a dog in a way that I think is actually completely inappropriate. Like, and especially when they interact with other dogs. Like, what do two dogs do when they meet each other for the first time? They sniff each other in the genitals.
Totally.
That is just normal social behavior. And like, again, it would be like if you went to a party and every time you try to introduce yourself to someone else, if you try to shake a hand or give a hug, someone else grabbed you by the neck and pulled you away. Right? It's that kind of thing, and I think that comes from, like, I get it. It's very easy to map our biology and our culture onto other species, but I think it is wrong to do so.
Sorry, I was going to ask, how do you or how should one behave with dogs then, or with animals in general?
So when we got Typo, we tried to prioritize smell in his life. So, for example, we would get a snuffle mat. So it's this mat with lots of it just had tons of fibers in it. It looked like a little sea anemone, and we would put his food in that so that he would have to sniff around to try and find it, to use his nose. We would play sniffing games with him. So, take a treat, break it up into small pieces, train him to sit and wait, and then hide the treats around the house, and then tell him to find it. And some tricks are hard to teach a dog, right? It took a long time to teach him to roll over, for example. But this game, Find It, he just got it immediately because that's what they do, right? That's how they live their lives and how they use their noses. And most importantly, when we go on walks with Typo, we try and do at least once a day where he has control, where it's a sniff walk. So we're not going from one place to another. It's his choice what he does, and what he does is he wants to smell. So if he wants to sniff one plant for 10 minutes, that's fine. We wait and let him do that. If he wants to, walk very quickly, that's fine. That's his choice. But often we find sniff walks are much, much slower. So we might walk him for 20 minutes and we might just do one block of our neighborhood because he's really taking his time and exploring everything. And I think that's an important clue, right? What do what do dogs and other animals in our lives choose to do with their agency when they are given it? That is often a big clue to what their needs are and what their sensory worlds, what their Umwelt are like.
And they can smell fear also? Or is it just a saying?
I don't think right. So when we say smell fear, right? Like, I don't think fear has a specific chemical profile that they're detecting. Dogs are very empathetic. Dogs have evolved over time to be very cued in to human emotions. So, dogs will be able to pick up on a lot of the cues that we give off. Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you scared? Are you angry? They will, tune into all of those things. That's a bit different from the sensory stuff that we're talking about. That's now you're starting to get into cognitive and emotional territory that isn't the topic of my book, but is sort of built on similar foundations, right? Like all of the higher level mental abilities we have, emotions, decision making, all of that is grounded on that sensory basis. I think of the senses as like the first step to everything else. It's the information we get about the world that then allows us to do things like have subjective feelings or to make decisions.
And I've heard you telling that dog can smell the past also. And I thought that was very, for me, and it makes sense once you explain it, but it's true that humans are very much in the present with senses, when dogs can go in the past. That's also, I think, super interesting, if you can explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so, smells linger for a long time in the way that light obviously doesn't, right? So I'm looking around my room right now, and the information that I'm getting through my eyes is immediate. It is what is happening right now. Now, I can make deductions about what might have happened in the past. So I can see a rack full of clothes that are drying out, which tells me at some point, those clothes were put in the washing machine, that kind of thing. But the information I'm getting from my eyes is very, very, very immediate. That's not true for smell, because sources of smell linger. The classic example is a dog peeing somewhere. That area will be giving off information about the dog that did the peeing for hours after it goes by. And so, a dog smelling the world is smelling into the past. It is smelling what has been rather than just what is. And it might be smelling into the future too. Like the smells precede us as we move through the world. So, a dog, smelling into the wind will know about things that are about to approach it in the near future. And so, this is... I think this is important because what it tells us is that every sense has different properties, like how its range, like over what time span it's relevant. So vision is a very immediate sense. It works over incredibly long ranges. It is very easy to block either by hard, solid surfaces like a wall or by darkness. You can't see at night, right? Whereas smell is a bit slower. So smells move more slowly through the world than light does, but it has this extended temporal dimension. You can smell into the past, you can smell into the future. It can sometimes work over very, very long ranges. Like smells can travel for kilometers or miles. They aren't necessarily blocked by solid objects. The smells can waft under a doorway or through a crack in a window. And then if you think about, for example, sound. Sound also isn't entirely blocked by solid surfaces. You can hear through doors, for example. Sound moves over long distances, but also has a bit of that immediacy that vision has. So, right, I guess my point is, every source of information in the world, whether it's sound, whether it's light, whether it's smell, has different qualities that make it useful in different circumstances. And that's really important for thinking about whether an animal might prioritize smell or hearing or sight or any of the weirder senses that we haven't talked about yet.
And what I mean, we've been talking about dogs for for many minutes. What about cats? What is their Umwelt?
So, unfortunately, I don't have a lot to say about cat owners. This was a huge gap in the research of this book. I just ended up not spending a lot of time thinking about cats.
I was wondering why, actually. When I read the book, I was like, oh.
So I think there's a couple of answers to this. Like, obviously, I'm a dog person. I have dogs, but I think that I chose every animal in this book very, very carefully. So that every time an animal appears in the book, it is doing two different things. Firstly, you're learning something about the animal itself, right? So with the dogs bit, you're learning about dogs and how they sense the world. That's great. Like there's a lot there. There's a lot of fascinating information you can learn. But you are also changing your understanding about either the sense or the world around you. So with dogs, everything I've hopefully told you about dogs, I would hope has maybe shifted the way you think about smell, like how it works, what it's for, what information it can give you. And then I also hope that it changes your view of even very familiar surroundings. So maybe next time you go on a walk with a dog, you will see your neighborhood in a different way. You will see the plants and other dogs and the sidewalk that the dog is smelling in a different way. So everything that I write about in the book does those two things. It changes your understanding of the animal and then of the world itself. And with cats, I didn't have that, right? Like cats have great senses. They have really keen hearing. They have a great, they have great night vision. Cats are extraordinary in their senses. There's no doubt about that. But like, all of those things that cats do were also done by other creatures that I wanted to write about instead. That also gave me that secondary thing. So with hearing, I would talk about how owls hear. With vision at night, I talk about this incredible bee that lives in Panama, or like the giant squid. And it was just a case of picking certain stories over others, but I apologize to all the cat owners out there. I hope you will give the book a chance, even though it doesn't have a ton of cat content in it.
I mean, as I said at the very beginning, the book is fascinating, but I was just wondering why the cat were not so much in there. But now I have the answer. You were talking about the sound, and regarding the sound, you talk about the whale and the whale songs. And what I've learned is that they can travel very far, and I was very surprised about that. Can you tell us the story about the whale songs and the whale? Yeah.
Yeah, so the biggest whales, so we're talking about things like blue whales or fin whales, some of the largest animals that have ever existed on this planet. They make very, very low frequency calls that are too low pitched for us to hear. These are called infrasounds, so extremely low frequency calls. Those travel over immense distances, and we're talking almost like oceanic distances, so thousands of miles. And they do that for a few reasons. Sound generally travels further underwater. Low frequency sounds travel even further still. There are some properties of the ocean that allow low frequency sounds to travel even further than you might expect through just simple physical principles. But what this means is that whale songs are massive in their range. The guy who first thought about this idea was a man named Roger Payne, and he was widely criticized for this. No one believed that it was possible. And then, in the 80s, some whale scientists got access to this network of hydrophones that the Navy had been using to listen in on other submarines during the Cold War. And those clearly showed that Payne was correct. Like, you could detect whales calling off the coast of Europe from hydrophones based off the coast of America.
Wow.
So these are songs that are moving over the entire Atlantic Ocean. And they would have been even more audible in the past, before the ocean filled with ships and like ships with propellers, which are incredibly noisy and would drown out a lot of the sounds that whales used to be able to hear. So, whales could theoretically hear each other over oceanic distances. Now, what that means is a bit unclear. Does it mean that could it mean that whales are communicating with each other over those distances? I mean, it's possible, but it's also hard to know how that would work. A call over those distances would take maybe like half an hour to reach the listener. So if it was a communication system, it would be a very slow it would take place over a very extended timescale. It would be very different than the kinds of communications that we would be used to. But we don't know what it is like to be a blue whale, right? So we know that they have possibly the capacity to do that. And I think that when you think about this, when you think about questions like this, it certainly changes the way I think about the life of a blue whale. So, what is a group of blue whales, right? What is a pod? Like, if I was on a boat and I saw two blue whales swimming next to each other, I would think, that's a group of whales. But if you have animals that can communicate over distances of miles, then you don't actually need to be swimming next to each other, right? You could have one whale over here and another whale that's miles away, and they might feel that they are just part of the same group, as if you and I were like walking next to each other. So when you think about what they're actually sensing, I think it really changes your understanding of things like their social lives in a way that you might misinterpret if you were just thinking about the world with human senses and at human scales.
And as I was listening to you, I was wondering, maybe they also have a different sense of the time, because you were saying a message will take 30 minutes, which for us, it's such an enormous amount of time. And yet, maybe for them, it's different. Also, I mean, I just don't know. I was just wondering, listening to you.
No, absolutely. And, we know that animals experience time differently, and we know that for certain senses, right? So in the chapter on vision, I talk about these incredible flies that have extremely fast vision. So they can launch into the air, capture another insect, kill it, and land in less time than it takes information to travel from our eyes to our brain. And then there are many of the birds around us, so the ones with very beautiful songs, can hear much faster than we can. They can hear qualities in the songs that go by so quickly that we can't even perceive them. So yes, there are animals whose senses operate on a very different time frame. Now, you can do scientific experiments on flies and on small birds that gives you that kind of understanding. You can't do that on a blue whale. So I fundamentally don't know how a blue whale experiences the world, but I think you're right that it almost certainly experiences time in a very, very different way to us. Just think about this, right? Like a blue whale, when a blue whale dives, its heartbeat might slow down to just 2 beats every minute. Wow. Like that alone speaks to the very different time scale at which it lives.
Wow, I was listening to you. I was like, drinking. I mean, there's an expression in French that is, I'm drinking what you're saying. I was not even thinking about questions. I was like, oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, honestly, like just do this exercise, right? Like put your hand on your neck, feel your own pulse, and count how many beats you have in this amount. So start now.
Yeah, and I think it's just like, it's so fast. I mean, it's like
Yeah, I mean,
50,
we
60.
could talk for a long time before we get to 30 seconds, which is how long it will take for a blue whale
Yeah.
for blue whale's heart to beat a second time. We're not there yet. We're now at 20 seconds. So this is it. It's such a different way of. It's such a different pace of existence.
It makes me.
There we go. It's 30 seconds.
It makes me think of this show on Apple TV where it's projecting in the future, and there is this researcher who's trying to talk with a whale because the whale is going to disappear. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I haven't seen it, and I am very dubious about some of these efforts. I think they're very well intentioned, but I sometimes think that they treat this question, this thing of like, can we actually communicate with other animals, right? As a vocabulary problem. Like it's like they have a language and we just need to work out what words they're using and convert those into our words 100%. And then we can talk to them, right? But that's not at all how it works, because, like we said, their worlds involve very different senses, very different bodies, very different nervous systems. So a dog exists in a world of smell. How do you convert that into something a human can experience? A whale exists at a very different scale of space and time. How do you convert that into something that a human can experience? You kind of can't. Like it's really not just as if. It's like the cheap way of thinking about this is like dolphins are the animal that people often think about in these kinds of efforts, and it's like dolphins produce these high-pitched calls, these series of clicks and whistles, and I think that sometimes when I read about this, it's as if like people think, oh, you can work out like this whistle means hello, or like this click means friend, and then we can talk to dolphins, right? And that's just not how it works. Like dolphins echolocate, so they produce these high-pitched clicks, and they listen out for the echoes that those clicks make after they rebound off objects around them, and through that. They can navigate around the water that would be very difficult to see in. That is such a different thing than what most of us do, that you can't just substitute your way into experiencing that. It's just, I think those efforts aren't grappling with how radically different the umwelt of another animal can be.
And actually, I was wondering what you're thinking about what is intelligence and what do you think of this expression AI? Because for me, I mean, AI is it's merely intelligence. It should not be called intelligence in the first place, even regarding humans. But then when we're discovering all those umwelts from different animals, then you understand that intelligence, it's so much broader than, just answering to whatever question from from an AI, And I was wondering, what do you think of this expression AI, and what is intelligence?
I mean, right. So I think the phrase has been so overused as to become almost meaningless. Like we use it to talk about a lot of different things. And I think, like, if you think about things like ChatGPT or like generative AI, the things that most people are talking about right now when they talk about AI, it feels like I don't feel like it's particularly intelligent. It feels like intelligence shaped. It feels like intelligence adjacent. But the thing that I don't want to go into a big rant about AI when we're talking about this book, but the one thing that I think is relevant is the mistake that people often make when thinking about artificial intelligence is that intelligence can be like you're sort of thinking about like a brain in a box, right? Like and neuroscientists make this mistake a lot too. There have been efforts to sort of catalog exactly how a brain works down to like the minutest detail, the individual neurons and synapses and all of that, and that you can simulate that to get an understanding of how the nervous system actually works, right? The critical mistake that makes, and that a lot of like AI discourse makes, is forgetting that brains exist in bodies. Like, no brain that exists on this planet has ever existed in a vacuum. They've always evolved in the context of a body. They've always existed plugged into sensory systems, into eyes or noses or any, even like bacteria have sensory systems too, without sense organs. Like nervous systems and brains have always existed to pass information about the outside world, and their intelligence is rooted in that. Intelligence isn't this property that just exists like in the cloud that you could recapitulate through this like, this entity that exists in a box. Like, it exists in the context of the surrounding world. So, like, let me give you an example, right? Like, an octopus is an animal that is, famously more intelligent than you might expect, right? An octopus does incredible problem-solving stuff. It's about as intelligent as like a pig, for example.
And a pig is very intelligent, by the way. A lot of people don't know that, actually.
Right. Yes. Yeah. No, I mentioned that because a lot of people are like, oh, no, octopuses are super intelligent. You can't eat octopuses. I'm like, but you eat pigs? Because it's about the same. Anyway, an octopus's intelligence is really different from ours. And that's the important thing. So this is an animal with about 3/5 of its neurons in its arms. And the arms can operate semi-autonomously, so with some degree of independence. Like, an octopus arm can reach out, grab a thing, pull it back in without ever interacting with the central brain. An octopus arm is entirely capable of solving a maze on its own without bothering the central brain. The brain has some control over the arms, but it's sort of a loose control. There's no micromanagement going on. It's like my arm is not going to do anything unless I tell it to. And it's not the same for an octopus's arm. There is some degree of independence there. And when you think about that, you understand that the intelligence is going to manifest in a very different way with this animal. So octopuses, if you present them with a jar with a crab inside, they will famously unscrew the jar, grab the crab, eat it. Yeah. Now, what is going on there, right? Is it the octopus's central brain with the eyes seen the jar and thought, crab, I'm going to unscrew it? Or did like an arm reach out, in a bit of curiosity? Can an octopus's arm be curious? Did it like explore the jar, like automatically unscrew it, and then suddenly it was like, oh, hey, there's a crab in here, right? Like actually, it's quite hard to tell, because what looks to us like very intelligent behavior is us understanding what the octopus is doing through the context of our own bodies, our own nervous systems, and our own senses. And I'm not saying that the octopus isn't intelligent. I'm just saying that the way it is intelligent is unique to it, and depends on having this body with this weird setup with 60% of your nervous system in your arms. It's just going to be a fundamentally different way of being intelligent than ours is, but it is a way that still depends on the body. Like, the octopus's intelligence doesn't just exist like in the brain. You can't like map it onto what exists in your brain, because those brains are connected to entirely different anatomy and nervous systems. And that's the important point, right? Like, intelligence isn't just this airy thing that we can talk about in the abstract. It is a property of actual brains which are connected to actual bodies.
And I know the book is not about AI, but I exactly wanted to point out that we have limitation in our understanding of what intelligence is. And I was gonna talk about octopus actually, because I really think they are fascinating also. And you made the point. So yeah, I mean, we are very limited in the way we understand intelligence. And actually, I think there are a lot of limits in our knowledge of the language and intelligence of other animals. Wouldn't you agree with that? I mean, we cannot understand the way they work because they have like senses that are so different from us that it's actually very hard to, I mean, in your book, you're doing a lot of effort to explain it, but there are limitations somehow for us to understand how they actually, I don't even know how to say, but how they live their world. I mean, what their umwelt is somehow.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. This is the big challenge of this topic and about writing a book about this topic, that I am asking people to try and think about what it is like to be another animal, but they cannot ever fully do that. Like it's actually an impossible task because we cannot fully put ourselves inside the brain and body and nervous system of another creature. Like I can tell you a lot about what I think my dog experiences of the world, but I don't know 100%, right? Like I can tell you how a dolphin uses its echolocation, but I don't really know what it is like to be a dolphin. There's always going to be this gap between our subjective experience of the world and that of another creature's. And science can take us close to the edge of that gap. And I think good writing can maybe even take us a little bit even further. But the gap always exists. And I'm not the first person to write about this. The philosopher Thomas Nagel wrote about it very beautifully in a classic essay called "What Is It Like to Be a Bat?", in which he argued that, yeah, you can imagine, flying through the air on wings or, eating insects and that kind of thing. But you don't know what it is like to experience the world through echolocation, through sonar. Even, and there are even a few people who can echolocate like a bat, and even they don't fully know what it is like to be a bat. So, there's always it's challenging because I'm kind of asking readers to engage in the slightly fruitless exercise that they'll never actually be able to fulfill. But my argument in the book is that even if you can't fully do it, it's really important to try. And it's really important to try because it changes our understanding of the animals around us, of the dogs that we care about, of dolphins, of whales, of all the rest. And it changes our understanding of the world. I think that you see gardens and sidewalks and the ocean and flowers in a very different way if you think about what other animals are experiencing. And I think that all of that creates this sense of magic in the mundane and the extraordinary in the ordinary. I think it shows us how rich and deep and wonderful the world is, even the parts of it that we kind of take for granted.
No, 100%. And I think just by understanding that we have cognitive bias is just amazing. Like your understanding of the world is limited, and just by understanding that, I think it's just great. And then the rest is a lot of knowledge, and and it's just again fascinating. I think.
Right. Absolutely. I think that the Umwelt concept is, to me, one of the most beautiful in all of biology. Like it's a humbling concept, right? It tells us that everything that we perceive, which we very easily think is all there is to perceive, is actually this very narrow slice of the world. And for that same reason, I think it's very expansive. It tells us that there's so much to learn about and so much to discover without needing to travel to new places or, to go on these fantastic voyages. That all of that stuff is is right here all around us. So, I can look out into my garden right now, and I can see birds in the tree. I can see a couple of finches and a mockingbird. Like, I know that those birds are capable of seeing colors that I cannot perceive, including some colors that are on all the flowers and the plants that are in the garden. Like, I know that those plants look very different to those birds and to the bees that are currently pollinating them. I know that in the grass and in the plants, there are likely to be small insects called leaf hoppers and tree hoppers. I know that those are going to be sending vibrational signals along the plants that I can't hear, but that other tree hoppers and leaf hoppers can pick up, and that those signals are beautiful. If you convert them into audible sounds, they sound like bird song or like musical instruments, or these weird mechanical, machine-like noises. So I know that even in this view that I look at every single day, there's all this incredible stuff going on that I don't perceive, but that I can know about by thinking about the Umwelt of the other animals around me. And I think that's just wonderful.
And you were talking about bees and flowers. What is the relationship they have both? Because it's always fascinating to see them around, and they are very important to flowers because otherwise they would not. They are pollinating them. I'm not sure about the word in English. Sorry.
No, pollinating is right. And bees, I think, bees experience flowers in very different ways to us. So for a start, they can see ultraviolet, which is a color that we don't see. And because all pollinators can see ultraviolet, a lot of flowers have ultraviolet markings on them. So even flowers that we think of as just being one color, so things like sunflowers, right, look yellow to us. But sunflowers have these beautiful ultraviolet halos, like bullseyes in the center, that attract bees that can see ultraviolet. A lot of flowers have this. They have landing strips and bullseyes and other vivid markings. And they look very different to us than to the actual animals they are meant to attract. Bees can also sense the electric fields that exist around flowers. They can tell different flowers apart by those electric fields. They might be able to tell whether a flower has recently been visited by another bee based on that electric information that, again, we don't perceive. And my favorite thing about the relationship between bees and flowers is this. I told you that bees can see patterns on flowers that we can't see. Now, if you ask that question from the other direction, right? Like if you look at all the flowers that exist and say, these are really colorful, like what kind of eye would be best at telling these colors apart? Like what kind of eye is the best eye for looking at flowers? You can crunch all the numbers, and what you come up with is an eye that is basically identical to a bee's eye. So it's not like ours. It's an eye that has three kinds of color sensing cells like ours, but that are most sensitive to blue, green, and ultraviolet. So that's a bee's eye, and that is an eye that is really good at telling different flowers apart. Now, you might then think, okay, so bees have evolved eyes that are really good at seeing flowers because they pollinate flowers. But actually, it's the other way round, because the bee eye, the setup of the bee eye came first, and flowers evolved later. And that means that flowers evolved colors that are really good at tickling the eyes of bees. And that's a really wonderful realization to me, because it's very easy to think of the senses as being quite passive things. You're sitting there listening to me. Light is going into your eyes. My voice is going into your ears. You're not doing very much, and yet you're absorbing all of this information. And it's easy to think that that's how senses work. But by absorbing that information, you are also, without doing anything else, changing the world. Just by existing, bee eyes shaped the colors of flowers. Bee eyes shaped the colors of flowers. And that's really magical to me because it means that we often say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right?
That's true.
But beauty also arises because of that eye. And I love that.
I love that. Actually, it's very poetic.
Thank you.
I think. What is to you the most fascinating sense that you've been finding across your study?
There are so many. I mean, even for vision, the sense that is most familiar to us. I write about all the ways in which it can be different. I write about birds that can see to the sides and to the backs of their heads, and how different it is to experience the world with vision as a wraparound sense. Vision can be really fast. Vision can work really well in the dark. There are animals that can see color in night conditions so intense that we couldn't even see our hands in front of our faces. Vision can be very blurry or very sharp. There are animals with dozens of eyes, hundreds of eyes, right? And then if you can go into senses that we don't have, that are just extremely weird. So there are fish that can produce their own electric fields, and they can sense the way those fields are distorted by objects around them, like rocks, which are insulating, or plants, which are conducting. And they, by sensing those disturbances in their own self-made electric fields, they can move through water that's too murky to see in. Then there are animals that can sense the Earth's magnetic field, that can move through, that can move over very long distances, that can migrate by working out which way is north. And there are just countless examples, I think, of senses, both familiar and exotic, that really stretch our understanding of what it means to live in this world.
And if you had to choose to be one animal per one day, what would you choose? Because you would like to feel the world as he is.
So there are many ones I could choose, right? Like we've already talked about some incredible ones like dolphins and bats and whales. But I think my perhaps slightly boring answer is I think I would choose my dog.
I was going to say.
Not because his senses are so spectacular, but because I think it would help me to understand him better. I think I would understand his needs and his experiences and his desires more deeply if I could see and smell and feel the world the way that he does. I think it would make me a better dog owner to him. I think it would make our connection a bit deeper, and I think that's what I want for people. The core of this book is empathy. It's about trying to take. It's about trying to step into the worlds, into the shoes of very different lives than ours. It's about trying to appreciate other creatures and even other people in a deeper way, and that's really the thing that at the center of An Immense World, and what I hope people take away from it.
How do you feel then about the loss of biodiversity? I mean, we've been, almost killing. I think it's 60%, right, of all animals on Earth, and I was wondering, how do you feel about that? Because then we are losing all that informations. For me, also because it's an ecosystem, and as an ecosystem, we need every single being in the ecosystem for the ecosystem to work. But I would love you to hear. I would love to hear you about the. I don't know if the word is correct in English, but ecocide.
It hurts me deeply. I've always cared about the natural world. I've always been fascinated by animals, and it's really sad watching the natural world erode in front of me. I recently started birding, so bird watching, right? And this is not something I've ever done before, and I got really into it over the last year or so. And I'm loving it. I can go out. I've started learning bird songs. I can identify them by their calls. I've seen like a few hundred species around California, where I now live. But I know that there are about 3 billion fewer birds around here than there were a few decades ago. There are entire species that used to exist a few centuries ago that aren't here anymore. And as much as I love experiencing the nature around me, I know that it is already this, pale reflection of the nature that was, and that what we have now is under threat. I think every time we lose a species, there's many tragedies there, but one of them is we lose a way of experiencing a world. Mm-hmm. We lose an Umwelt that is unique and distinct from ours, and I think as a result, the world gets a little smaller. And I think that you have these like vicious cycles, right? In the book, I write about this problem of noise and light pollution, of sensory pollution, that we fill the world with too much stuff, and we push animals away from our lives, or we drown them out. I can hear so much more birdsong where I live now because it's relatively quiet than I could when I used to live on the east coast of America, when it was in the middle of a city and much louder. Hearing more birds makes me more connected to them, and was the reason why I started birding in the first place. And now that I'm birding, I can hear even more birds, and I know what they listen to. And that ability to be connected to nature and the appreciation of nature feeds off each other. But conversely, not feeling connected to nature and then not caring about it feed off each other too. And I think that's one of the cycles that we risk plunging into. We drive the natural world away from us, or we drown it out. So we don't think of it as part of our daily lives. So we don't care about it. So we have no reason to protect it. So we drive it out and drown it out even further. I'm hoping that this book is a way out of that it helps to break that cycle, that it makes people curious and empathetic and just interested in the natural world around them. I hope it makes them understand that world is not a remote thing. You don't need to go to a national park or hike in the mountains to experience it. You can experience it in your garden, or if you don't have a garden, you can experience it in your local park, or just by watching your dog walk around your neighborhood. Nature is everywhere, and I think that if we won't be able to stop the ecocide, we won't want to protect it if we don't care about it. And this entire book is a call to care. It's my attempt to give people a reason to care about other creatures that they might not have, and not just obvious ones that we do care about, like dogs, but not obvious ones like spiders and snakes and bats. They're all worth knowing about, and they're all worth caring for.
And you won a Pulitzer Prize on the articles about COVID, and because the thing is that the way we behave with animals also have impact in our lives, and COVID is a very good example of that, right? Or
yeah, no, I agree. Right, like we are creating a world in which new viruses could very easily hop from animals in the wild to us. And that's part of that. That's related to the ecocide that you're talking about, right? It's all driven by the same factors, like loss of habitat, climate change. All of those things not only make lives harder for other animals, but also increase the risk of further pandemics for us. But I think also, this this lack of empathy, this lack of curiosity about other lives, hurts us in the context of the pandemic too. You know, I wrote so many pieces about groups of people who felt left behind by COVID, groups of people who are still suffering, even though most people have, quote unquote, returned to normal. Long haulers who have long COVID, healthcare workers who are still traumatized, people who are still grieving loved ones who died of COVID. They're all important, and their stories are often not told. And a lot of my work is about trying to get readers to empathize with them. So, you know, it's the same idea. It's about curiosity and empathy for lives that are very different to yours. I think that we need more of that, whether we're talking about other people or other animals, whether we're talking about pandemics or the loss of biodiversity. Those values underlie so much of what we need right now for all the big existential problems of our time.
And because we might experience other COVID-like disease somehow. If we continue pushing, it will happen again, right?
I'm going to tell you that it absolutely will happen again. You know, there's really no if about it. It's just a case of when. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people. I've heard a lot of people say, you know, COVID is a generational thing. It's not going to, you know, now that we've had this, it's not going to happen again for a while. And that's not true. It's not true. I wrote a piece in 2018 for The Atlantic about how the world was not ready for the next pandemic. And then one happened, right? And the fact that one happened doesn't protect us from there being another one. And indeed, like, all the conditions for another one are there. Even if you just take climate change alone, right? So climate change means that a lot of animals are moving into places of the world that they weren't previously living in because they're trying to track changing environmental conditions. When that happens, species that never previously interacted are meeting each other for the first time, and they are exchanging viruses that now get a bunch of new hosts to infect. That is happening all around us all the time. It has been happening at an increasing pace for many years, and it will continue to happen at an increasing pace. And all of that means that new viruses have plenty of opportunities to jump into humans, because the sites where those, you know, ecological meetups are happening also overlap very strongly with areas of dense human population. So, like, I guarantee you that we will have to deal with all of this again. And we better become better at doing that, because maybe it's not going to happen next year or the next decade, but it will happen. Like, this is the era of the world that we have inadvertently created. And we need to deal with that. We need to deal with that reality.
Thank you so much, Ed. I mean, thank you so much for all the work you're doing, basically, for the message also, I think, about empathy. I mean, we really, really, really need empathy right now. So thank you so much. The last question of the podcast is the podcast called Volant, and I would like to know what you want to open or slam the door to.
It's everything that we talked about, right? I want to open the door to a deeper understanding of the natural world. I want people to think about what the spider in the corner of their room is experiencing, or what their dog is smelling on a walk, or what the birds flying overhead are seeing. You know, I think that once you really start doing this, there's no limit to the number of questions that you can ask and the new ways in which you can see the world. And I hope that people start that journey after reading An Immense World.
Thank you so much. I mean, I have so many other questions actually, but I will invite everyone to read the book, because it really is fascinating, and I think for animal lovers they will just love it. It's perfect. It's a perfect gift for Christmas, actually, I think. But I mean, it's perfect for everyone, basically. Thank you so much, Ed, for your time.
Thanks, Greg. Take care of yourself.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Merci d'avoir écouté Vlan. Si vous avez aimé l'émission, n'hésitez pas à mettre des étoiles sur vos plateformes de podcast préférées. Vous pouvez aussi partager l'épisode sur vos réseaux sociaux, Instagram Stories, Facebook, LinkedIn, où vous voulez. Je suis Grégory Pouy. Vous pouvez me retrouver sur l'intégralité des plateformes sous le nom Greg from Paris. Si vous avez des idées pour des invités, si vous avez des commentaires, n'hésitez surtout pas à m'envoyer un message. Allez, merci et à bientôt.